Hello and welcome to Move the Line, presented by 4for4 Bets. I'm Ryan Noonan, back to talk 3 weeks out, guys. Back with my very smart friends, Vegas Refund, Scott Smith, Connor Allen, here to talk about all things NFL Draft. Continue to be your home for all things NFL Draft betting, specifically here on the 4for4 Bets YouTube channel. As we get close here, the market's coming out with some new stuff on DraftKings last night that we're going to get into today. Super stoked about that too. We'll start with Connor. What's going on, buddy? How are we doing today?
Yeah, not much. Excited to start betting a little bit more. I got a couple of good plays that I think we got in the hopper that, we might release here in the coming week or so.
Yeah, we pushed on some of that stuff last week, and some of those line movement has happened without you VR, but good to have you back in the saddle, buddy. What's going on?
What's going on? Have a sleeping baby that I'm going to bet on the under on him staying asleep for the next hour, but we're probably good.
Yeah, some stuff to talk about in the news that have happened since we've last met as well. I know Scott is doing his work, grinding those top 30 visits, and his latest mock draft 2.0 is the freshest up on the site right now over at 4for4.com. I'm sure we'll touch on some of that today as well. Scott, what's going on, bud?
Not too much. It just seems that every time I drop a mock, the big news happens right afterwards. The Bills went ahead and traded stuff on Diggs, which kind of changes the back end of what I already had set. So I'm sure we'll kind of hit on some of that. But look, it's the home stretch. We're down to about 3 weeks left. So it's time to start getting some live plays out there and start seeing some of the action.
Yeah, so you want to take advantage, get all the live plays that we're going to do here with this group at 4for4. Go ahead and subscribe. Go to 4for4.com/plans. Check that out. You can get a betting subscription for the rest of the year. Get in the Discord, get all that stuff. Some exciting more information on that to come here in the coming days, which I think will be enticing for you if you are kind of just hanging out and grabbing the free stuff for now. You're going to want to check that out very, very soon. If you are not hanging out with us on YouTube, obviously available in podcast form as well, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe, rate, review, all those things go a long way in helping us. Before we kind of jump in, I kind of want to walk through a mock today too as a group and get some consensus, some additions from Scott with what he had of late and maybe any more news. But Connor, I'll kick it to you to kind of touch on what Scott is talking about there and has been mentioned here in the chat. Obviously, about 24 hours ago, you could grab a Bills first draft pick wide receiver at like plus 110 on both DraftKings and FanDuel. And that is cooked out now to, I don't know, like minus 240 or so. First pick for the Bills to be a wide receiver, minus 300 on DraftKings, minus 240 on FanDuel. Obviously, everything else is massively dipped. What are your thoughts or any takeaways there with Steph Diggs trade, Connor?
Yeah, I mean, I did grab some at minus 110, like around even yesterday. And I think that especially for all of you who use like PPH and like offshore stuff like that, I mean, that lingered around for an extra 20, 30 minutes. So, again, like having access to that stuff is pretty invaluable, especially when stuff like this happens. But even then, I mean, FanDuel, Caesars had it up for a couple of minutes. Like at this point, I think that they're very live to trade up for someone like Brian Thomas. I think that there was a video clip that went around that I believe Hayden Winks or someone else tweeted out that was like Josh Allen talking about which wide receivers he liked. This is like a month or so old. And Brian Thomas was the first one he listed, also listed A.D. Mitchell. So I think that both of those guys are super live for the Bills, whether it's trading up or even standing pat. I think that initially we were interested in them drafting maybe a guy like Xavier Worthy as kind of like a field stretcher to support some of the middle of the field guys that they have with Kincaid, with Shakir in some sense, with Stephon Diggs. But now without Diggs, I think they're more in play for kind of like an alpha. So, I think that someone like Brian Thomas makes a little bit more sense in my mind that can play on the outside and inside. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't lay the minus 240 at the current price, but again, I dropped it in the Discord, not as an official play, but I mentioned it was like, hey, get this immediately. I think a bunch of our subs did too. So, just another, shameless promo there for our subscription.
Yeah, jump in there. Before we jump into the mock too, we had a new market pop, DraftKings specific, which is interesting. And I'm gonna share my screen here. We can take a look at this too. VR, I know you want to touch on this here. This is first round odds on DraftKings. Some of these are quite interesting. I'll give you the floor. Let you take it away.
Yeah. So I mean, first off, these are fake odds. Like these are like in terms of like implied probability, like this is just not real. But it is funny because usually they at least DraftKings usually releases over-unders first, and then we've gotten first-round odds like the week of or the week before the draft actually kicked off, which getting them opposite so far out I was not expecting that whatsoever. And they popped, I want to say, around like 10 last night, maybe a little bit earlier, and they pulled them. I want to say it took only 40 minutes for them to pull them. And I don't know if it had to do with Jordan Morgan because they had him listed at Joshua Morgan at first. And I don't know if they pulled him to correct it, which I currently have a Joshua Morgan ticket, unfortunately. Hopefully that doesn't become unfortunate. But a bunch of them moved. I want to say there were like 4 or 5 guys. I think I jumped on 4, but like the big movers were Jordan Morgan opened at -120, which that was pretty wrong. And then it moved to 180 and now it's up to 230. I won't be surprised if this gets past 300 within the next couple of days or maybe a week. And then I would say Edgerrin Cooper was probably the biggest mover, which he's another guy I hopped on. But he opened at 6-1 down to 330. And Cooper and Rakestraw were 2 guys that I jumped on myself, which I got Cooper at 550 and then Rakestraw at 500, which these were purely based off of the Jeremiah top 50 that ironically came out yesterday as well, which really all you have to do is who is Jeremiah higher on than the consensus, which the Athletic consensus opened or updated yesterday as well. And Rakestraw and Cooper are 2 guys he has in his top 30. I think Cooper's 26, Rakestraw's 28. And then the consensus has both guys 35, 30-ish. I don't know. I could look on my Google sheet, but really that just kind of implies, or you could maybe assume, hopefully it's been pretty accurate the last couple of years, that when Jeremiah has a guy ranked ahead of what the consensus does, those could be guys that we see teams are higher on than might be being portrayed by the media, which could present, I guess, quote unquote, value in the draft market. So those are 2 guys. Hopped on Jordan Morgan as well at -180. I ethically, I don't think I could recommend anything higher than 200, but it's only going to go up at this point as well. And then who else did I get? I think those 3, and then maybe someone else. I forget. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, they're all moving. Like sometimes they update these odds, like give it like a quick refresh after a couple of days, and you can jump on them again. But there are a couple guys that I'm eyeing that I'm going to keep the lead buried for now with how sensitive it is. But there is some value here, but like you see guys like Frank Gore Jr. at the very bottom, and obviously they're just there for name value, and Rice.
Sure.
But a lot of these guys at the bottom are popping up in mocks here and there. Always worth a bullet. There's a strong consensus right now for the first round. So finding a spot for a lot of these long shots to fit in based off of what we're seeing in mocks is probably going to be a little bit harder than what we've seen in the past. But I would probably say wide receivers or corners are maybe sneaking. McConkey is the one I'm probably going to regret not taking. He's definitely getting a lot more popular in the mocks, especially with the Bills pretty much locked in at a wide receiver. And then like the other one, I was Worthy being -120. I'm not betting it, but just comparing him to Mitchell, where I just think they should be probably closer. That was like one of my first thoughts, like Mitchell at -800. I mean, Bo Nix at -200. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what? It's just fake. But yeah.
Scott, what are your takeaways here? Anything jump out to you or any thoughts? Some guys that I think have been in the back half of your mock draft here, popping up and maybe some plus money odds, or some guys that are at least interesting.
Yeah, so the 2 guys that he hit on, Jordan Morgan, he's a guy that there's some arguments among the scouting community whether or not he's going to have to kick into guard or whether or not he can play right tackle. There's some good sources specifically with Baltimore that they think he can play right tackle and that he would definitely be in play. Both him and Tyler Guyton are 2 of the players that are getting a lot of a lot of interest there with Baltimore and their pick there at 30. Specifically, though, the Edgerrin Cooper one is the one that interests me the most. I've reached out to a few people that I know in the Dallas market that are connected with the Cowboys, and they seem to think that Cooper is definitely in play for the Cowboys as high as their pick there. Specifically, the thought process is that Tyler Smith is going to move over to left tackle full time. And that because of how weak this linebacker class is, that Edgerrin Cooper is definitely in play there in round one. VR went ahead and mentioned some of the stuff with Daniel Jeremiah's rankings and some of the other rankings across the the industry and whatnot. And Edgerrin Cooper, because of how weak this class is, he's definitely a player that if a team needs linebacker help and needs to get out in front of the market, then he could be a first round pick. The other thought process specifically with Dallas is that this tends to be a little bit deeper of an interior offensive line class, and the movement of Tyler Smith specifically to left tackle would allow them to get a player that they project as a starter caliber later on in the draft and still be able to go ahead and get Edgerrin Cooper. So I think there is a lot of smoke and a lot of signals that Edgerrin Cooper could be a first round pick, but specifically there to Dallas, they have done meetings with him at every single opportunity they could. Pro Day, Combine, I think they have a top 30 scheduled with him, and Dallas is specifically one of those teams with Jerry Jones where they do tend to pick players that they visited with. So I think Edgerrin Cooper, there's still some value left there at 330, and with VR getting on him down at 550, I think that's a hell of a play.
And the one thing I want to touch with on Morgan, my only hesitation is it's somewhat the opposite of like Cooper and Rakestraw that I mentioned with Jeremiah's rankings, which Morgan's the one guy that Jeremiah has ranked higher than the consensus. He has him at 39. Like the consensus has him as a consensus first rounder. So I guess that's the one kicker that has me a little bit worried, I guess, in terms of like laying this price. But at the same time, these tackles are going to go over under 9.5, and I think it's going to go over. And then Cooper, like Scott said, like the 30 meetings, which I just learned that it's not top 30 meeting, it's just 30 meeting. And there's the case to be made that guys that are having a lot of 30 meetings, like I think it was Rappaport tweeted this last year, is that they have a lot of 30 meetings, like they have questions to be answered to teams. And if you see guys that aren't having a lot of 30 meetings, then there's really just, they check all the boxes and there's no really big reason to bring them in, but that's remained to be seen. But Cooper's had 30 meetings with the Eagles, Cowboys, Packers, Bucks, which is picks 22 through 26. And I want to say, I don't think anyone in his range has had at least 4 30 meetings so far, I think, or even close. So, I mean, and like Scott said, like the Cowboys really tip their hand. Like the only team that tips their hand more on meetings is probably the Steelers. So that's also in play with that's 4 30 meetings within 5 picks. That would put him squarely in the Jeremiah range of 26.
If it's a massive team need to, but Dallas needs a linebacker. Question here for Scott too. Wondering what your inside sources are hearing about Kingsley from BYU. He's someone that's been in the back end of your mock draft here, plus 170 to go in the first round. Obviously, with whatever's going on with Rashee Rice, does that switch up needs for Kansas City? Obviously, a lot still pending there. That's been kind of the favorite spot too. Teams are just mocking one of, a lot of times it's been Mitchell or Worthy or throwing a back end receiver there to Kansas City. But I know offensive line is still in need as well. And Kingsley has been someone that you've been kind of honed in on here. Any thoughts there?
So specifically when it comes to Kingsley Suamataia, if you look at the trends throughout the NFL, the majority of the left tackles that you have starting in NFL are first round picks. And unlike some of the other offensive tackles or offensive linemen that are projected to go in the first round, he squarely projects as a tackle. It's not something where you're getting a lot of projection with him moving on to the inside. So a lot of teams will have him a little bit higher than maybe a guy like Jordan Morgan and whatnot. There are some concerns about his motor and about his work ethic, and those concerns are that he needs to be kept on track and he needs to be motivated to kind of get the most out of him. My understanding is that he had a strong meeting and workout specifically with Kansas City. That is the team that he has been linked to most, and whenever I do research and keep hearing, that's the team that he's connected to. It fits a need. You do have some of the Rashee Rice information coming out, so some people are kind of pivoting and going back to that wide receiver. But with some of the legal stuff that I've seen, there is a thought process out there that Rashee Rice may not even miss any time with him kind of cooperating now after everything. When you start to look into the Texas legal code and stuff, it's really going to probably end up being a misdemeanor or pleaded down, to nothing. So that's kind of my thought process. I don't really pivot back to the wide receiver. I think offensive line is still squarely in play, and Kingsley Suamataia is definitely a guy that is connected there to Kansas City.
Yeah, and kind of one of the last ones too, in terms of like guys that are occasionally popping in the first round or have first round grades. We touched on like Zach Frazier last week, who we were seeing pop up a little bit. He's down here, again, less of a tackle, more of an interior lineman, or even center with Frazier at 8-1, which is interesting to see too. So yeah, some of these names become viable, but to VR's point, like they're kind of fake odds. Definitely in terms of like guys at the top and their probabilities of coming in here. Connor, real quick before we hop into our mock draft, anything to add based off of these first round odds?
No, a lot of it seemed priced pretty correctly. I think the only thing I would like to add is that FanDuel normally drops this exact same market, and usually you can parlay them. Now they drop the top 5 market, and they can't do that. But sometimes there's a couple. I mean, I'm pretty confident Graham Barton's going to be a first-round pick. Again, not sure I would recommend or go lay -1,000. I'm not, Dane. I don't do that. But I do think that if you could parlay like one or two of these guys, I think generally it's a little bit more palatable for most people. So.
Yeah, they let you start parlaying like the week of. Like,
Yeah.
So if like the odds came out today, like they wouldn't let you parlay, but
yeah,
and like the week of, they open up the floodgates for that.
2 years ago, they let you parlay right away, and it was fantastic.
Oh yeah,
which is why they no longer let you parlay right away.
And Rivers usually releases this market, and there were some that were just like wild. It was like Darnell Wright opened at like -250 to be a first round pick or something like that, which is obviously like way off. So that is something that I did lay the juice on, and it was just like maxing whatever they give me, which again wasn't very much, but hey, it adds up.
Yeah, spends the same at the end. So, all right, interesting to see. And again, like, yeah, it's like cool. Shout out DraftKings. We appreciate you being first. At the same time, like they take on zero small limits, and they're willing to take on zero risk with some of these prices. So it's like we want to give you props for being out early, but at the same time, it's kind of a tough.
Like every year, like I wish like if there was like a no, like there's some I mean,
prices.
It's every year. It's a one-way market. It must be nice, but
yeah,
the no's would be just as fun.
We're so thirsty for it. They know they can get away with this stuff. So, all right, let's mock. We all kind of agree that there's a definite forming consensus. We try to push back on a little bit that last week in terms of what's going on in the top 10. But for the sake of it, I think we want to try to get to the meat of the middle here of the first round to have some discussion so we can kind of fly around and get this first part of it out. Though obviously, we have to dance around 4 or 5 and what that trade looks like and who that is. But for the sake of everything here, I'll take the first pick and I will go with Caleb Williams to the Bears. I feel pretty confident about that, guys.
Wow.
I'm not even going to open up for discussion. That's how confident I feel. Scott, I'm going to give you the floor for number 2. You're muted, bud.
So I have pivoted. The majority of the smoke is on Jayden Daniels. You've been getting some J.J. McCarthy news as of late. I don't necessarily buy that. The majority of that news is coming from his quarterbacks coach, who at the pro day, apparently the Washington brass and front office members said, look, J.J. McCarthy has, all the tools. I don't know what else they're going to tell him. It's not like they're going to be like, hey, your guy looked like shit or anything like that. I mean, by all accounts, he did have a good pro day, the best pro day of the quarterbacks, but I just think there's too much of a projection there. So Jayden Daniels is going to be the pick for Washington at 2.
All right. VR, Pats.
I'm gonna go Drake May, and this is it's pretty simple. Drake May. It feels like Drake May's kind of gotten the CJ Stroud treatment the last couple of weeks, like last year that there was that small window of people kind of, it wasn't like the Wonderlic or whatever it was. There was like just a window of like devaluing Stroud. And then all of a sudden, as we get closer, it was just nonsense. And it kind of seems like a similar situation with Drake May right now, with it's just something to talk about and see all the videos. And Drake May, who's been like a consensus top 3 pick for the last 2 years, really, whether it was based off his receivers or just last year being a down year, he's kind of been getting shit on, and people are pumping JJ ahead of him. And I mean, it could happen, but I'm just not buying it yet. And Drake May, and I think the Patriots are going to stick there. I think they're going to take a quarterback. If you look at the quarterbacks the next couple of years, it is a tough scene. And I think Kraft wants a QB, and I think he might be saying that it's Mayo's decision, but in the end, it's really his. I mean, you saw both coaches, or you saw Wolf and Mayo say they were going to spend all of the free agent money this offseason, and they didn't spend a dime. And you wonder why, because who's in charge? Kraft. And here we are, and he's saying it's going to be Mayo's decision, and I think it's going to be his decision. I think he wants a quarterback, and I think they're going to take one. And I think it's going to be Drake May.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because it's bleak without a quarterback, and theoretically, it's nice to add a bunch of building blocks and add a QB when you're ready. And when you're ready, you don't typically get the shot to do it. So, Connor, the burden falls on you. Arizona at 4. Do they stand pat? Do they make a pick? Or they're going to get a bunch of deals here. You made the joke with us earlier in the chat that like Monty Ossenford is like the South Park dad, and whatever question of which dad picture that is, it's him right now. He's got all the answers that coming into him flying. He's going to get a lot for this pick if they want to move off of it. Who does it?
Yeah, I'll go with just the Vikings, just to keep it like kind of traditional here for the at least the top part of the mock. I think that they would have to give up 11, 23, and then plus something else specifically. I do think though. So initially I was like pretty bullish on them trading sooner than later. And I think from a perspective of Minnesota, Denver, the Raiders, the Giants, I would assume that they all are trying to offer stuff, but it might be beneficial, honestly, for the Cardinals to wait and see if you can continue to drive the price up, kind of like they did with, Houston. And, apparently there was other people trying to bid for that number 3 pick last year in that sense. And then they wound up getting an amazing deal. And the video is going viral, Monty Ossenford just like, speaking outrageously fast, thinking fast, like talking, like it was crazy. And I think that's almost the environment that I think Arizona like is willing to go into again. And so, and I think that we could see another draft day trade, which is going to be horrible for mocks, horrible for us, terrible for betting. Like it's very, very, makes our lives way more difficult, but I think that's what we're going to see here. And they're going to pick JJ McCarthy.
All right.
Also, this mock Sims board is a little wild. Like, there's some stuff.
It is so annoying.
It is.
So, I mean, also, like, if they're listening, give us like a go back button for God's sakes. Like,
agreed.
Click the wrong guy, or like you want to change something. Like, don't make us restart. Like, come on.
Yeah. At least can I can filter by
Can you
ADP.
sort by ADP too? Is that?
I don't think so.
You can't.
No.
I was wondering that too because I've done a couple of these and I'm like, dude, why is it like? I mean, no offense. I just like. You're doing a mock draft. I don't really care what your opinion is on a player. Like, I just want what the ADP is.
Yeah. No, you can go in the settings and you can manipulate like if you do auto, like, are they going off of consensus board versus their rankings, but it doesn't give you the ability to filter it here in the drop down. So, all right. Back to me at 5. I mean, I still think this is a chance that the Chargers are trading back. Connor, I know you've been on this too, or push back again a little bit on Marvin Harrison Jr. landing there. I think for the sake of moving this forward, I'm just going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. For the Chargers, but I think Chargers moving back still very much in play and viable as well. Scott, good with Nabers at 6, or any thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm good with Nabers at 6. I think he's the projection. A little bit of pushback they've been getting is with some off the field concerns. That stems back from a couple of years ago, specifically at Mardi Gras. He was basically in a little sweep of the crowd. He was found to have a gun. Those charges were thrown out and dropped. So, it is what it is. I don't think there's much else past that. So Nabers is pick for the Giants.
Imagine going to Mardi Gras without your gun. Like, I mean, well, it's just a kid.
You got to be
right?
strapped, bro. I mean, come on. The streets are wild out there.
Look, the other option is to leave it in your vehicle, in which case it's just going to get stolen and broken into there. So,
right? Or if you're Connor, they just take the whole car. Like it's so. What are you gonna do? You can't even go retaliate. So, VR alt to 7. Any thoughts on mixing it up?
I'm gonna mix it up. I'm gonna do a trade, and I'm gonna.
Ooh.
And this might be like 2 assumed, but I'm just gonna do it anyway. But I'm gonna trade the Cardinals into 7.
I like this.
And they're going to give up 11. And I don't know what's more realistic, 23 or 27, but it doesn't matter to me. I use, when I'm doing this, I just do 27 because why would they trade out of 4 to only give it up? But I'm going to do that trade, and then they're going to take Odunze.
I like it. All right. Cardinals here. They are on the clock. Let's draft a player. Odunze to the Cardinals. So they're able to move back and then kind of move back up. They did it last year. Again, obviously that current video of last year's draft room, like Connor was touching on, is floating around, and definitely within the range of possibilities, fits a team need and keeps them kind of pliable on this board.
And if they were to do this, I think clearly you probably want to go to 7 just to like protect yourself, but you want to get ahead of the Bears most likely. And I think the Titans and the Falcons are in great spots to trade back into like 11 or 12 because they're probably going to get the same guy or a very similar guy that they would take at 7 or 8 at 11 or 12 at the same time. So it makes a lot of sense. Cardinals, they did it last year. I don't know if them doing it last year is creating a bias that they're going to do it again or what, but it's just Odunze's elite. Makes total sense.
Yep. No, I like it. I like keeping it. We're kind of within the consensus, but I like to push back on it too because I feel like that's where we still need to fight. There's so much groupthink right now, and like let's staying pliable in terms of what teams can do, and I think it makes a lot of sense. This is the team we touched on last week doing this specific thing here too. Connor, was the Falcons because nothing is being mocked, and we looked at VR's sheet. It was like almost 90% or something like that over the last like month or so. It's just Dallas Turner, edge, Atlanta. Do they mix it up? Do they trade back? Is there another edge? I was touching on it earlier. Like it's a little early, but there's the Jimmy Lake ties to Jimmy Lake was the defensive coordinator at Washington when Latu was there, and now he's a new defensive coordinator in Atlanta. He's getting a little bit of buzz. There's a little bit of connection there. That seems early in terms of our perception, but if they have him higher on the board, it still meets the same team need. Some of that stuff is at least interesting to me. But the floor is yours, Connor. 8 to Atlanta.
Yeah, let's roll with Latu. Also, we have Clemson Jeff, our local reporter. He used to be like I did some more digging on who he is because he's obviously trying to remain anonymous, but whatever. He used to be a radio guy apparently, and so I think he has some plugs. Miko swears by him, so if this is wrong, then I blame Miko. But he said that the Falcons have Latu first on their board ahead of Dallas Turner. And then it would be like Latu, Turner, and then Verse or something like that. And then maybe a corner. He said that they're also in the market to trade back. So again, I mean, I know I'm not sure I'll have him in my final mock here, but for this purposes, also we saw some people come out and say Latu should be edge 1 like yesterday. So, I mean, I don't think it's that crazy. There's obviously major medical concerns. He medically retired. Jimmy Lake was actually the coach to announce that he medically retired. So it's definitely some concerns there. So let's roll with Latu for this. I don't think it makes anything too crazy, and I think is a somewhat realistic scenario. And before we get into the Bears, I did talk to my guy, and I'm not going to tell the live stream who the Bears are looking at because there are no markets out, and I'm not going to give the free people access to what I would consider very, very, very strong information. So I will release that eventually in our Discord when there's markets, but I'm not going to say anything until then. I have not even told Noonan or Scott who it is or anyone because I think that there will be a great market and it'll be some good money-making opportunities.
And Darnell Wright was correct last year from this same source. So
Yeah.
they even were able to land that. So in the meantime, I'll, I guess, take advantage of just, pumping in something to the Bears here. Again, this is another like normal consensus pick as of late. It's just been Odunze because he's there. But in this spot, like that would be a dream scenario if I was the Bears to be able to stay at 9 and land Odunze and pair him with Caleb Williams. I think is kind of wild. I think the Bears offensive line is kind of sneaky good. I think they kind of like what they have there. So it'd be interesting to me if they were to stay at 9 or to add an offensive tackle with one of these top picks, because I feel like it's a young, controllable offensive line that's pretty cheap that I think is just last year missed some time. They weren't able to really gel, and when they had everyone back in together, it was pretty good. Like they kind of seemed to, I don't want to say hit a home run with Braxton Jones in the 3rd round 2 years ago, but when you have a guy that could step in as a rookie, play as well as he did at left tackle, you go out and draft a right tackle, you kind of have that solidified. You don't really have other guys to slide in because you've kind of hit some other good picks with Jenkins and some other guys in the offensive line. You spent money with Davis last year early in free agency. Like they kind of have it built. So adding depth makes sense, but using like top 1st round equity on a tackle, I just kind of challenge that on the Bears side. Now, maybe they have evals internally that make more sense, and we'll kind of figure that out. But I would want them to probably add some sort of playmaker here. And in this instance, I would have wanted to go Brock Bowers, but they added, they added some free agency with Everett too. So this is kind of a tough spot for the Bears. I'll kick it to the team here. Anyone have any thoughts with how this board shakes out and what the Bears would do? No one wants it.
This is like kind of like the worst case scenario for them.
Yeah, they'd want to trade out of this, I would think.
Yeah, I kind of would just like default to alt, I guess. I mean, it's just such a, yeah, I mean, I would, I guess alt because he just would be there and they're just not expecting him. And I mean,
my other thought process was there at 5, there was an opportunity for Chicago to trade up to get Marvin Harrison Jr. If they could come out with Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr., I think Bears fans would rejoice. But here we are sitting at 10 trying to decide between, a bunch of guys that may not make sense. And I kind of agree. I think I would default to alt.
Okay.
They should have had that pick anyways if they had tanked like they should have in the next second of the season. What the?
I think it would be alt or Turner for me. Alt Turner, because Turner's still there since he didn't go 8.
Yeah. I'm going to go Turner because I think that makes a lot more sense to me. That makes. I just don't think that offensive line is. It's not a need, but I think they need depth more so than top of the line starters. I could be wrong. It could be just kind of where I'm at. So, all right, Scott. Jets, kind of a newer consensus is Brock Bowers. They've obviously added some offensive line talent. The defense is one of the best units in the league. They've gone ahead and added to some edge rushing talent there. Obviously, long-term solutions of the offensive line still are a need here. So a couple of good options here with Alton Bowers for the Jets.
Yeah, so my thought process here actually would not go in the direction of alt. It would actually be in Talise Fuaga. And the reason being is that essentially they have Tyron Smith and they have Morgan Moses, and they could put Fuaga into the guard situation, but I'm not going to go that route. I'm going to go with Bowers because the information that I have heard lately is that they do prefer to go with the offensive weapon, either Odunze or Bowers, if they are there. They think that Aaron Rodgers could get the most out of those two players. So let's go with Brock Bowers here at 10.
Betting odds are interesting on this. DraftKings has offensive line and tight end kind of flat. FanDuel a little bit different, a little off market. You can get some I think 2-1 to go tight end. You're also still considering wide receiver to be a decent option for them. That is getting shorter over the last week or so. It's gone from on DraftKings +4.25 to +250, which is interesting there too. I guess in this scenario that would be a Brian Thomas selection, which is I think in the cards, but definitely a guy that has a fairly wide range of outcomes. It feels like right now with kind of how these are going. But yeah, we'll go Bowers here. 11 is the pick now for VR. We were wondering who was going to be the 11th pick because he made the trade. But yeah, back to the Titans. And man, what a like wet dream for the Titans
I
to
know.
kick the
Like,
can
this
down the
is,
road.
yeah, this is like dream come true. Joe Alt run to the podium, you would
Yeah.
assume.
All right, Connor. This is perfect. Connor gets his Broncos. The Broncos, a team of point of contention in terms of mock drafts with, where is their primary need outside of the quarterback position. Continue to talk about quarterback being, I just cannot see Sean Payton rolling up week one with Jared Stidham, no long-term developmental prospect on the roster. It would seem like a reach to take a quarterback here. Ideally, you would love to be able to do what the Titans just did, trade back, still get your guy. We know that doesn't always work. It's really hard to find out how far can I go back. Can I recoup a second round pick because I don't have one of those? Like, a lot of stuff going on here with your Broncos, Connor. What do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, there's no shot that they move back behind their division rival who also needs a quarterback and then take in hopes that their quarterback that they want is still there. Like, that's just not going to happen. So I think that there's two options here, or a couple options. We have Timothy Chalamet from the chat saying it'll be Terrion first corner to Denver. I mean, I think that's an interesting option. I don't know Timothy Chalamet. Maybe I do. I don't know. But yeah, well, I don't know. Interested to hear why he thinks that maybe down the road. But I don't know. Let's go Bo Nix. I mean, I feel like it sounds crazy to us. I think it's crazy. I think most mocks think it's crazy. But all that matters is the opinions of Sean Payton and their front office. And like, I think that right now, if I'm the front office, I'm probably fighting Sean Payton not to take Bo Nix, because taking Bo Nix, I think is going to go poorly. I mean, I know Sean Payton's a good coach that has coached similar guys who can do that. They just don't really have the infrastructure around a guy like Bo Nix, I think, to make him successful. So again, if I was the front office, I'd be pushing back on it, but I don't think it's that crazy. I mean, the Broncos are, what do we say, minus 160 to take a quarterback, minus 150 to take a quarterback in the first round, which seems way too aggressive considering it like basically has to be Bo Nix or they have to trade in. So I don't know. I think that Nix here is fine for the purpose of the mock. And if they don't go that way, I think the correct approach would either be to trade down or to take Brian Thomas or a corner. I think all of those options make sense.
I agree. Scott, you were here early. I think even your first mock had Bo Nix to Denver. And I remember looking at VR's sheet at the time being like, well, I think you're going to be first on this one. Didn't disagree with your process. And I feel like I couldn't agree more with all the things that Connor said. This is kind of the spot where I think we were wanting to slow down and maybe expand a little bit. So I want to get both of your guys' thoughts on this too. Scott, you can go first.
Yeah, so the thought process specifically that I have is from a fit standpoint. And I don't think that there's really much out there from a trade standpoint, from a free agency standpoint. There's really no other way for Denver to address the quarterback situation. There is, you start to look, Michael Penix has gotten a little bit of rise lately. I would say I don't necessarily agree with it. I think, while Michael Penix has a great arm, you look at the game specifically against Michigan, and Michigan just said, screw it, we're going to take away the deep, and you're going to have to consistently be accurate through the short and middle of the field and make the right decisions consistently. He hasn't done that. There are injury issues that they have. While some people say that, his medical's checked out, he ran a great 40 time. I don't think any of that fits into what Sean Payton wants to do. I think from an offensive coordinator, play caller, head coach standpoint, Sean Payton wants somebody that's going to go out there and run his plays and make the decisions that he trains them to do within the process of his offense. Bo Nix is a guy that fits that. His decision-making, his accuracy, and that's one of the shortcomings he's had throughout the draft process is his inability to really take a deep shot. And so you have to wonder how he operated within the Oregon offense, but he did so at a high level. And I think that's one of the things that, you're going to have, and one of the things that he's going to fit there with a Sean Payton type of offense. The issue is that he is being highly overdrafted here at 12. But what is the option for a Denver team that doesn't have a lot of draft assets to move up? I would think that they're going to be on the outside looking in for any of those other guys with Minnesota in the driver's seat to move up. So it's one of those situations. My latest mock draft, I had them trading back in with future picks to pick 31 there with San Francisco to take Bo Nix. I've heard some rumblings that they're possibly looking at trying to get a combination of a wide receiver and a quarterback there with the first couple of picks that they have. But look, it's viable. I don't agree with it from a team building standpoint, but I could definitely see Bo Nix going here at 12.
VR, what do you got here?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think trading back is totally out of the question where like Knicks to the Broncos strong with fit. And just Penix to the Raiders feels strong with fit for them. So like I guess I know that the Raiders really are the only other team that is desperate for a QB, and I'm not so sure that the Raiders would take Knicks over Penix. And if they do trade back for a team that is lacking assets that would love some more, like I don't see a lot of risk trading back, and you still probably are going to get Knicks, unless I think like I don't see a lot of scenarios where Knicks is going to go if he doesn't go to the Broncos. And again, I truly don't believe in trading back or letting your franchise quarterback fall to you. I think if you don't have a top 5 pick, you go get your franchise quarterback. You trade up. Exhibit A was the Patriots letting Mac Jones fall to them after they traded back a couple of spots. And I mean, it's a great argument now because he was ass. But like if he's your franchise QB, you either go get him or you have a top 5 pick. You don't just hope he falls or trade back and hope he falls. So that would be my belief against it. But like if Knicks doesn't go, I think everything you hear is the Raiders like Penix. Like I think he was there yesterday. So like Knicks to the Broncos, Penix to the Raiders are like the trendy spots. And if the Broncos don't take Knicks at 12, like I don't see that big of a risk losing out on him to the Raiders. And I don't know who else would take Knicks before them if they were to trade back in or hope he falls to them in the 20s or whatever it would be.
Can we talk about real quick the Michael Penix like bag pumping that is going on right now too? I mean, this is the most ridiculous water carrying that I've seen in my life. I mean, the Raiders I think have legitimate interest. I buy that. But like all the reports from like Jordan Schultz is just like, you know, literally carrying this agent's water and Michael Penix's water. I mean, it's very clear. Like it started early. It's like, you know, Michael Penix locked in first-round pick. Medicals are clean. He's 24 years old, guys, with multiple torn ACLs and didn't really play all that well in certain times throughout his college career. Like these are things that are like, it just doesn't pass the smell test at all.
I mean, we're stuck in a loop. Like this same thing was Hendon Hooker last year.
Oh, 100%.
Old ass QB.
Yeah.
Has ACL tears, is literally Penix. Like it's a photocopy situation.
So could they take him at 13? Maybe. I think he's more likely to be like a second, like mid to late second rounder than a first rounder. So I don't know. I'm just not buying that hype at all. I am buying the Bo Nix hype, but not Penix at all.
I don't buy it, but
yeah, I get it. Like there's so much nuance into landing a quarterback, especially in the process of what we're trying to do. We're trying to make bets around it. We're trying to mock it out. The nuances around having Denver address the quarterback position, which I think we all agree has to be a priority for them, especially Sean Payton, who's, you know, anyone that's that great at their job, like you just have a lot of ego. Quarterback whisperer, just really convenient. You had, you know, Drew Brees for a long time and you get dubbed the quarterback whisperer. Let's see what he could do with Bo Nix. He sure as hell is going to be put to the test with the whispering. It might be quarterback screamer if you kind of bank your future on Bo Nix being your signal caller in the division with Pat Mahomes. But like, I'm going to put Bo Nix here in the draft in the mock that we're doing because I think it makes a ton of sense. And whether we like it or not, I think it is increasingly likely. And again, I think they're going to try to throw the bag at Arizona at 4. I think they want to get in the mix there. I think they're going to drive that price up. They don't have a second. I think they'll go full Rams, less Snead, punt future picks to try to get their guy to get, you know, JJ if he's there at 4. I think they're going to go ahead and make that, make that call there too. So for now, we'll do Bo Nix. The Raiders are up. We kind of touched on the Raiders here as well. I think that's a very interesting team and an increasingly difficult team to mock because there are numerous needs there. Interior defensive line is noted here, probably less of a need now that they added Christian Wilkins. I don't think that they do anything here with that position, but cornerback definitely a need. They're not going linebacker this early, but quarterback still is in play very much here as well. Connor, you went Bo Nix. Scott, I'm going to kick it to you for the Raiders. What do you want to do here?
Technically, it's your pick, but look, the guy that I think
I was hoping you would notice.
Yeah, the guy that I think makes a lot of sense here for the Raiders is Talise Fuaga. Specifically, they need right tackle help. I think they're doing well on defense with the way they've added some pieces, specifically Christian Wilkins to go with Max Crosby. The other two players that I would consider here are there at cornerback, whether it be Terrion Arnold or Quinyon Mitchell. But I think the smart play, especially with the situation their quarterback situation is, whether they do decide to go ahead and pull the trigger on Penix in the next few rounds, I think Fuaga is a really good fit here for the Raiders at 13.
Yeah, the corners are very interesting too. VR, any thoughts on the Raiders?
Yeah, I mean, Mitchell's kind of the consensus right now for the Raiders, and not buying the Penix. If I'm making like a mock right now myself, like I'm kind of just defaulting to offensive line, where Fuaga is like the strong number 2, in my opinion, to alt. So makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Don't hate that at all. Tough team to kind of peg. Maybe we'll get more information there in the coming days. The Saints are a massive favorite. We talked about it last week. Even one of those scenarios where, I got steamed out after the Ramczyk news. Seemed like that they were going to be a offensive line team to begin with, but might be one of those spots where, man, even with what we know, it does maybe still make sense to lay a little bit here, because offensive line feels like a absolute layup here. VR, let you get your choice of tackle here to the
Colts.
You want the Colts? Okay, I'll take Saints. We'll
It's, I mean, got to be Fashanu, right?
Fashanu, I think, makes the most sense. Yeah.
Why did you have to scroll down from him? I mean, again, it's ridiculous. Whatever.
Yeah, he's further down on their list. So, yeah. Hey, we're doing it different. This is definitely opinion based on the PFF side. No hate there. I mean, we guy at the top of our list here is a borderline first round pick in a lot of mock drafts that are coming out right now. But that's it's okay. All right, VR, you on the Colts? Here we are. I mean, Chris Ballard goes Raz heavy typically, and some good athletes still in some team needs specifically too.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Brian Thomas, which I believe his RAS is definitely qualifies. It's like I think it's a 9.8, which definitely qualifies the need. Brian Thomas, I won't be shocked if he goes earlier than this. Remember Scott bringing him up a couple of shows ago, thinking that he's going to go a lot earlier than a lot of projected mocks have him. And 15 almost feels like the latest he'll go. I don't see him getting past the Colts here. RAS, need. I think his stock is going to only go up. It just feels like the sweet spot for the Colts. I guess you could either go like Thomas or maybe Mitchell. Mitchell falling to 15, I think, is would be a surprise as well. But for me, like I'm just gonna take borderline elite Brian Thomas, where taking an elite like first round grade wide receiver feels like a lot better of a bet than taking Mitchell, who is, I would love to know if the Colts ever take non-Power 5 draft picks, which we could probably check out on that club sheet. But yeah, Brian Thomas, slam dunk for me. That's why I wanted it.
I like it. Connor, any thoughts?
I think he could be a candidate for, like, if the Cardinals do trade back to 11, 12, 13, I think that if all the other 3 receivers are off the board, that the Cardinals could easily go with Brian Thomas or an offensive lineman there. So that could make sense. But yeah, I think it would be a really tough decision for the Colts here at 15 if both Brian Thomas and Mitchell were on the board, because they both are 10 out of 10 on like what I think we consider Chris Ballard to want, and both needs in some sense. So yeah, I think it's good. And the price on the Colts too is interesting. So
yeah, I think wide receiver for the Colts is like plus
260. Yeah.
260. Yeah. And I mean, if we didn't do that trade with the Cardinals and they were sitting at 11, I probably would have gone Brian Thomas with Turner going to the Bears at 9. I would have gone Brian Thomas at 11, which would have been an easy layup with Mitchell falling to 15 with this pick now.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's definitely in play. Got to take the lid off. Alec Pierce is not that guy. With the way that they used Pittman last year, Josh Downs, like having a field stretcher with the elite skills of Brian Thomas, I think make a ton of sense there too. Obviously, DB makes a ton of sense and has been popular there too. Connor, Seattle 16, another interesting team. A team maybe doesn't get on board with some of the historical trends in terms of athleticism, in terms of like they'll go not like full Belichick, but they'll go definitely off the board a little bit. And I think everyone was caught off guard last year with what they did even in the first round with going with Devin Witherspoon, which I thought was an interesting pick, but obviously a dog. But what do you think here with Seattle?
Yeah, they do whatever they want. And so it makes me skeptical to lay the -150 on offensive linemen for them. But I mean, according to VR's mocks, we have 77% of people picking offensive linemen for the Seahawks here. So I think that I'd probably go like Fatanu, but I think that makes sense. But like I've seen people mock Jackson Powers Johnson. He's reportedly falling, so like I don't really think that at this point like he's really very much in play. So I think Troy is a little bit better there in this spot. So that's what I go with. But I mean, Byron Murphy, like that would not surprise me at all to like take someone like Byron Murphy like that. He to me is almost like a Devin Witherspoon-esque, like good player that fits a need, but like no one's really talking about the fit right now. It just could be a good draft pick for them.
Fatano is like probably, and it brings me back to last year as well. Like Fatano is like an incredible consensus right now, and I know it has to do with like the Washington coach connection to like the Seahawks.
Yeah,
O-line coach was with Washington or whatever, and like I mean every single mock has Fatano at 16, and it reminds me of the Steelers last year, which I think the Steelers had 16 as well, with Joey Porter, with the connection with his dad to the Steelers. Like Joey Porter was just an auto mock at 16. And I'm not saying they're the same player. They are not. It is apples to oranges, but like just when you get such strong consensuses in the mocks in this range, it gets a little scary because when it doesn't happen, the dominoes really fall. So yeah, I mean, Fatano.
I like it. The interesting one, it would be really bizarre in the way that this mock has fallen out because we still have both top corners on the board here last year or right now. They had trouble last year, and again, new coaching staff. But like Breek Woolen, who was kind of like the belle of the ball, late round pick the year before, really had trouble staying on the field last year. They had some struggles there, mixing in guys. They've kind of revamped their secondary. At safety, Rayshawn Jenkins came over from Jacksonville. They brought in Kayvon Wallace, who floated around with the Eagles in Tennessee last year. They still have Julian Love, another confirmed absolute dog in the back half too. But you do have that thought of like, I've seen this discussed and I forget where, and I had been thinking about it and it made more sense. You have Mike McDonald coming over and really was able to take that Baltimore defense last year to a new place with the way they kind of used just in a really weird way, that kind of Mike linebacker safety position and did lots of different things with it. And the way that Cooper DeJean can kind of play, he fits a really unique role that I think would be very interesting to Mike McDonald. Can you take him as the first corner off the board when you're going to use him in like a hybrid slot safety kind of role? I'm not sure. Are you taking him ahead of, Arnold or Mitchell? I'm not sure, but that team fit and player fit scheme wise makes a ton of sense to me. But not something I want to do here, but just something that I want to watch and see if there's any visits going on there, kind of how DeJean's individual pro day goes. Cause obviously he's been dealing with some injuries and hasn't been testing. So we'll do offensive line here to the Seahawks. I'll take Jacksonville for us. Jacksonville, I think, is a layup for a cornerback. You can make the case that they can go elsewhere, but in this spot, I think they were able to stay home and take corner. I'll give them Quinyon Mitchell. Again, we know traits, Trent Baalke, arm length, Raz, all that stuff has popped up for us, obviously, over the last couple of years with him being in Jacksonville, and Mitchell falls there nicely to them. All right, where are we at? Who's at 18? I missed because I went out of order. Connor, I'll give you 18 to the Bengals.
Okay, let's see here. Bengals. I think that probably I would be like Byron Murphy or another offensive lineman here. I don't really remember who we have on the board offensive line wise, but I do think that Byron Murphy makes a lot of sense. You made a great case last week about how, they lost DJ Reader. Maybe they get a guy like Byron Murphy in there. I know that he's a popular pick to the Rams, but they need some help on the defensive front. So I think that D-line, or maybe I think JC Latham was a popular pick too, because he can play on the offensive line as well. I don't know. Scott, does that line up with what you were thinking as well?
Yeah, JC Latham would have been the pick that I would have put here, specifically the right tackle issue. We don't know if Trent Brown's going to be the guy or not. And, with that offense, and specifically when it comes to protecting Burrow, I think Latham would be the pick that would make the most sense. Amarius Mims would be the other consideration. I think Mims is a little bit more set for a right tackle, where Latham could probably kick into guard if they needed to and wanted to run Trent Brown at right tackle. So I think Latham holds a little bit more weight here, but the other person that I did have in consideration is Byron Murphy. So
yeah, I like the Murphy stuff. I talked about it, as Connor mentioned, and I think right now the odds there are interesting comparatively. Obviously, we're kind of a massive favorite for first position to be offensive line. DraftKings is minus 200, FanDuel minus 160. But if you go defensive line, you can get a really nice number at 430 on FanDuel, a little bit shorter on DraftKings. Again, like BJ Hill's in the last year, his deal, DJ Reader is gone, and they were an absolute sieve in the interior defensive line last year. And Murphy's a fun talent. Now, again, in that you're making that play, you can obviously add offensive line later, hope that Trent Brown can be pieced together and can solidify the right tackle spot. That's tough to do. So if I'm betting at this right now, I think it's closer to not necessarily even, but I don't think that it should be 4-1 or more for interior defensive line to the Bengals, considering the needs there. So we'll go Latham here for the sake of the mock, though. I think it makes a ton of sense too. Definitely worth looking at. And again, another place to maybe drill into a little bit more detail. All right, VR. We'll go to Scott. Scott, the Rams 19. Tough team. We have not a ton of historical trends. They don't make a lot of first round picks. They've first one since 2016 here. What do you think the Rams do at 19?
Yeah, so you have the retirement of a first ballot Hall of Famer, sitting there with Aaron Donald leaving. And so Byron Murphy has been the pick that makes the most sense. I think if Byron Murphy does go earlier than this, I think you start looking at some of the defensive ends, whether it be a Jared Verse who's fallen in this situation, or, Latu's another guy that I think could fit in here, somebody to be on the other side of Byron Murphy, who they got in the excuse me, not Byron Murphy, but who's the guy I'm thinking of? Byron Young, excuse me, who they got last year in the third round. So I think they would go ahead and want to fill the shoes of Aaron Donald. Byron Murphy has, been mentioned as possibly being the top defensive, pick in the draft. There's some outside money there for him to be the first defensive player off the board. It just makes too much sense here with Aaron Donald being gone. They have, a big gap that they need to fill in the center of that defensive line next to Kobe Turner. So I would go with Byron Murphy here. Yeah,
I like it quite a bit. We were hoping to get through 20, and looks like we're going to do that kind of right on the dot here, VR. Real quick, I just want to see what we did, something a little bit off the board. We went Latu first defensive player off the board. I just want to see pricing wise. 7-1 on DraftKings and 9-1 on FanDuel for Latu to be first defensive player off the board, which I think is interesting. All right, we wrap it up here. Steelers 20 VR. I think offensive line makes a ton of sense. It feels like their top two needs are tackle and interior offensive line. So, you can make a case that they can go elsewhere. There's some, corners that I think are here. I mean, Arnold is falling in our mock here as well. A couple of the edge rushers as well. But what are your thoughts with Steelers to take us home?
Yeah, so the Steelers are probably, out of all the teams, they tip their hand the most with their meetings. And right now, based off of their 30 meetings and who they've had in so far, the only guy of the offensive lineman in this range that they've had a meeting with so far is Mims. And I will take that and I will go with Mims because there's no reason to think otherwise. If the draft was today, he's the only guy that he met with, and he is most likely going to be their pick because It's how it's played out every single year. They meet with the guys that they draft, and right now he's the only guy in that range that they've taken. And like I honestly feel like the confidence that I have in them tipping their hand, where if it was like Mims and Latham still on the board, or even like any of the other guys outside of maybe Alt, like I still think they would take Mims over the other guys because of historically how they've tipped their hand and just based off of who they've met with, assuming that Mims was the only guy that they had met with with the draft being, let's say, hypothetically today. So I'll go with Mims.
And the Steelers have like the most elite high school first off the bus bookend tackles. I mean, it doesn't matter in the NFL as much because these guys are all massive. Like, you take that road game and you throw those first two like massive human beings, Roderick Jones, Amarius Mims, off the bus first, just to scare the shit out of the other team. These are like massive human beings, bookend tackles for the Steelers I'm sure they'd be hoping for years to come. So yeah, as VR said, I mean, we typically, at least the last handful of years, it feels like you know who the Steelers are taking. Maybe it changes with Omar Khan. It didn't necessarily last year. It felt like we kind of had a little bit of that information. So maybe it still kind of is the same thing. So we made it to the top 20 kind of right on time.
And I know like receivers a need for them, and like just looking at like who they've met with so far, they met with a bunch of like receivers so far that are probably like early second rounders, where they met with Malachi Corley, who like just feels like he was born to be like, he's like the non-power 5 receiver that they hit on every single time, whether it's like Deontay or who's another guy that they took recently. But either way, like if they draft a receiver, he's going to be good. It's just, I've looked into how they do it. It's insane.
Crazy.
So yeah, I do feel pretty strong with them taking a receiver. So they've looked at Corley, Leggett, someone else. Yeah, either way, receiver feels like second round play for them.
Pearsall feels like a potential Steeler pick there too. Jeff gets it. He knows that Connor would be last off the bus carrying the water bottles for the team. Look, everyone plays a role, Connor. That's okay.
I mean, no, it's at one point I was the last guy off the bus, carrying the water bottles to the team. It's called being a freshman, on a team. So it's everyone's role at some point. And if it wasn't, then your team probably sucked.
All right, that was good. That was a good process. I mean, I think we had some good dialogue, and again, some interesting names still on the board. But I think it's pushing back on some of the consensus, not just to do it, but also just to try to think about how these things transpire, because this is such a domino situation, right? You pull one piece out, and we kind of even saw at 9 with the Bears, when things fall a little bit different, all of a sudden it's like, well, now what, right? And there's just a trickle down effect to one pick going a little bit different. I think making sure that you're shopping odds as these kind of, can be manipulated very easy with very little action over the next couple of weeks as we start to get a little bit more stuff, making sure that you're right now looking at possible options where you can take some nice plus money on some scenarios that are actually well within the reach. And I think the Bengals, for instance, I think in this discussion today, going off the board from an offensive lineman standpoint, probably is something that should be discussed. Same thing with, we didn't get to the pick, but we touched on the Cowboys and linebacker in some of those scenarios too. So we'll continue to do that too. Some good questions around how to get some possible discounts. Show notes there. Again, stay tuned here in the coming days. We'll have some more information as we kind of get closer. 3 weeks away, guys. So
and if it feels like corner and edge are like the two positions that, if they do fall, are going to, like if Turner doesn't go to the Falcons, like slotting him, he's going to push everyone else. Or like Latu not going, let's just say Latu doesn't go to the Falcons, like those guys can fall into the 20s. And then corner as well, like we just saw like Mitchell falling because guys like Turner are kind of pushing everyone back. Like those are the two positions that can fall, but at the same time, like I think O-line is just like locked in. I don't think they're going to fall. But
and then we got hung up on it today too. Broncos Raiders. You throw quarterback in there,
right?
That shifts kind of the math, right? And then same thing if they end up going, say, corner and offensive lineman in whatever order, the calculus changes with how that trickles down too. So some of the kind of, I think, key pivot points right now with where we're at for 3 weeks out. So, all right, hit the thumbs up on the 4for4 Bets YouTube channel and subscribe before you take off. Again, show notes for more information, podcast form, wherever you listen to podcasts as well. Head over to the site, check out Scott's latest mock draft. We'll continue to have some more information and get you in that betting sub, get you in the Discord, get you all the official plays here in the coming days. So look out for that. So for Connor, Scott, and VR, I'm Ryan. We'll see you all next time. Thanks, everyone.